They say that money doesn't have a smell, but that is a lie told by people who have never worked for it. Clean money, the kind you earn with your back and your hands, smells like sawdust, linseed oil, and the sharp metallic tang of a table saw at 6 in the morning. Dirty money smells like nothing. It is sterile, cold, and odorless, just like the air inside the First National Bank on a Tuesday morning. I stood in the queue, my boots scuffing against the polished marble floor that cost more per square foot than my first workshop. I am Henry Caldwell. I am 74 years old, and my body is a road map of 50 years of labor. My spine is curved from leaning over workbenches, my knuckles are swollen from gripping sanders, and my lungs are coated with a fine layer of oak dust that will likely be the death of me. But today, I forced my spine straight. I stood tall, because today I wasn't just a carpenter. I was a man who had secured his legacy. I held the envelope in my hand with a grip that defied my arthritis. Inside was a cashier's check for $400,000. It was the buyout price for Caldwell Cabinetry, the business I had built from a garage operation into the premier woodworking shop in the county. Yesterday afternoon, I sat in my son's office, my old office, and signed the deed over to him, Lucas, my boy. He had cried. He actually hugged me, tears streaming down his face, thanking me for the family discount on a business that the assessors had valued at nearly $1 million. "I'll deposit the check first thing in the morning, Dad," he had told me, his voice thick with emotion. "You start your retirement. Go buy that fishing boat." I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the bank's heating system. I had done it. I had raised a son who wanted to carry the torch. I had passed the baton. The voice snapped me out of my reverie. I walked to the window. Jenny was working the counter. I liked Jenny. She was a sweet girl, maybe 25, with a kind face and a patience for the elderly that was rare in this town. She knew about my roses. She knew about the time I built the gazebo for the town square. "Good morning, Jenny," I said, sliding the heavy glass door open. Usually, Jenny would smile. She would ask if the aphids were gone from my prize bushes. But today, she didn't smile. She looked at me, and her face was the color of old parchment. Her eyes darted to the security camera mounted above her head, then back to me. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. Her voice was tight, strained. "Just a deposit today," I said, beaming. I pulled the check out of the envelope. It felt heavy, substantial. I slid it under the glass along with my deposit slip. The big one. Lucas bought me out. Jenny looked at the check. I watched her hands. Usually, tellers move with a rhythmic efficiency. Stamp, type, file. But Jenny didn't move. She stared at the piece of paper as if it were a venomous snake coiled on her counter. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. "I'd deposit the check first thing in the morning, Dad," he had told me, his voice thick with emotion. "You start your retirement. Go buy that fishing boat." I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the bank's heating system. I had done it. I had raised a son who wanted to carry the torch. I had passed the baton. The voice snapped me out of my reverie. I walked to the window. Jenny was working the counter. I liked Jenny. She was a sweet girl, maybe 25, with a kind face and a patience for the elderly that was rare in this town. She knew about my roses. She knew about the time I built the gazebo for the town square. "Good morning, Jenny," I said, sliding the heavy glass door open. Usually, Jenny would smile. She would ask if the aphids were gone from my prize bushes. But today, she didn't smile. She looked at me, and her face was the color of old parchment. Her eyes darted to the security camera mounted above her head, then back to me. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. Her voice was tight, strained. "Just a deposit today," I said, beaming. I pulled the check out of the envelope. It felt heavy, substantial. I slid it under the glass along with my deposit slip. The big one. Lucas bought me out. Jenny looked at the check. I watched her hands. Usually, tellers move with a rhythmic efficiency. Stamp, type, file. But Jenny didn't move. She stared at the piece of paper as if it were a venomous snake coiled on her counter. She didn't pick it up immediately. She didn't type the amount into her computer. She swallowed hard. I saw the muscles in her throat work. I asked, leaning in slightly. Jenny didn't answer. She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw something that made the hair on my arm stand up. It was terror, pure, unadulterated fear. She reached for a pad of yellow sticky notes. She kept her hand shielded behind the monitor, blocking the view from the camera above and the manager's desk behind her. She scribbled something furiously, the pen scratching loud in the quiet space. Then she did something strange. She stuck the note to the underside of the check. She slid the check back to me under the glass partition. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice shaking so badly she could barely form the words. I think you need to verify the endorsement in the privacy of your car. I can't process this right now. The system is—" I frowned. "The system is down?" "Please," she whispered. Her eyes were pleading. "Please, Henry, take the check back." I froze. She had used my first name. She had never done that. The urgency in her tone pierced through my confusion. I reached out and took the check. I felt the sticky note underneath my thumb. "Okay," I said slowly. I turned away from the window. I felt the eyes of the bank manager on my back. I walked toward the heavy glass doors, my heart beginning to hammer a warning rhythm against my ribs. I walked out into the blinding sunshine of the parking lot. The air was cold, biting. I got into my old Ford truck. It smelled of sawdust and peppermint. It was my sanctuary. I sat there for a moment, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Then I flipped the check over. The note was written in jagged, hurried scrawl. "Don't deposit this. It's counterfeit. The routing number is flagged. If I run it through the system, it automatically calls the police on you for fraud. Leave now." The world stopped. The traffic noise on the street faded into a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I stared at the note. Then I stared at the check. To my eye, it looked perfect. It had the bank logo. It had the watermark. It had my son's signature, the loop of the L in Lucas exactly how I had taught him to write it. It was a check for $400,000. But Jenny was risking her job to warn me. She was telling me it was a trap. A counterfeit check. If I had handed that to a teller who didn't know me, or if Jenny had simply done her job, the silent alarm would have tripped. The police would have arrived. I would have been standing there holding a fraudulent financial instrument worth nearly $500,000. And what would Lucas have said? I closed my eyes, and the scenario played out in my mind with horrifying clarity. The police call Lucas. And Lucas would look shocked. He would say, "I never wrote that check. My father has been having money trouble." I tried to help him, but I didn't give him that. He would play the victim. He would claim I forged it, and I would be the desperate old man caught trying to steal from his successful son. I gripped the steering wheel, gasping for air, feeling a pain in my chest that was sharper than any saw blade. It wasn't a heart attack. It was the sensation of my life breaking in half. I realized then that Lucas didn't just want the business. He didn't just want the building and the land and the reputation I had built over 50 years. He wanted it for free. He wanted to steal it, and he wanted to put me in prison so I couldn't fight back. He had hugged me yesterday. He had cried on my shoulder, and all the while he had this piece of paper in his pocket, waiting to destroy me. I looked at the check again. It was trash. It was a weapon. If you are listening to this, if you are sitting there thinking that your family is different, that your bloodline is immune to greed, stop. Look at the paper in your hand. Look closely at the people you trust. Just because you changed their diapers, just because you paid for their college, just because you love them more than life itself, it doesn't mean they won't sell you for parts. Don't make the mistake I did. Don't assume loyalty is hereditary. Subscribe to this channel, listen to my story, because I am about to show you how to survive the day your legacy turns into a crime scene. I put the key in the ignition. My hand was shaking so bad it took 3 tries to turn it. The engine roared to life, a familiar, comforting sound in a world that had suddenly gone insane. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home. My house was full of pictures of Lucas. Lucas at graduation, Lucas catching his first fish, Lucas standing in the shop holding his first dovetail joint. If I looked at those pictures now, I would vomit. I drove to the workshop. I parked down the street behind the old bakery where my truck wouldn't be seen from the main lot. I walked to the corner and peered around the brick wall. I had painted it myself in 1985. Lucas's car was in the lot, a brand new BMW. He must have bought it on credit, anticipating the free business he was about to acquire. He was standing outside the loading bay doors. He was laughing. He was talking to a contractor I recognized, a man named Miller who did cheap, fast renovations. Lucas was pointing at the building, making sweeping gestures. He was planning. He was already spending the money he hadn't paid me. He had the deed. I had signed it legally in front of a notary yesterday. He owned the building. He owned the land. He owned the tools I had collected for half a century. He owned the contracts. And I had a sticky note and a counterfeit check that could send me to a federal penitentiary. I stood there, hidden by the shadows of the alley, watching my son laugh. I saw the way he stood, arrogant and relaxed. He thought it was over. He thought the police were probably arresting me right now. He was likely waiting for the phone call, rehearsing his shocked, disappointed voice. A grief so profound it felt like drowning washed over me. I wanted to walk over there and scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to ask him why he hated me enough to do this. But I didn't move. If I confronted him now, he would deny it. He would call the police himself and say I was harassing him. He had the legal paperwork. I had nothing. I watched him slap the contractor on the back. I watched him unlock the door to my shop with my keys. The grief began to harden. It cooled, freezing into something sharp and brittle in the center of my chest. I turned around and walked back to my truck. I didn't confront him. That is what a father would do. That is what a victim would do. I am not a victim. I am a craftsman. I know how things are built, and I know how to take them apart. I started the engine and drove away slowly, careful not to peel out, careful not to draw attention. I needed to know exactly how he did it. I needed to understand the mechanics of the trap before I could spring it back on him. I needed to find the loose thread in his perfect plan. And I knew exactly who to ask. Betrayal has a weight. It sits in your gut like lead shot, heavy and cold, pulling you down even as you try to walk straight. I drove my truck to the edge of town, to Sally's, a diner where the coffee is strong enough to peel paint, and the booths have high backs, offering the kind of privacy men like me appreciate. I needed neutral ground. I needed answers. My phone felt like a live grenade in my pocket. I pulled it out and texted Jenny, the teller. I had her number from years ago when I helped her fix a broken dining table her grandmother had left her. Break time. Meet me at Sally's. Please, it's life or death. I didn't wait for a reply. I ordered a black coffee and stared out the window at the gray asphalt, watching the cars go by, wondering how many of those drivers were being robbed by the people they loved. 20 minutes later, the bell above the door jingled. Jenny walked in. She was still wearing her bank uniform, a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders as if she were cold. She looked over her shoulder twice before sliding into the booth opposite me. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red. "Mr. Caldwell," she whispered, leaning across the table, "I could get fired for this." "You saved my life, Jenny," I said.
My voice was steady but gravelly with the unshed tears of a father mourning a living son. Fired is the least of what could have happened today. Tell me. She took a shaky breath. She looked down at her hands, twisting a silver ring on her finger. The check, she started. The routing number? It belongs to a bank that doesn't exist anymore. It was a regional bank absorbed in a merger 10 years ago. The account number? It's one digit off from Lucas's actual business account.
To the naked eye, it looks real. It looks perfect. But to the banking system? I nodded slowly, absorbing the mechanics of the trap. If you had deposited it, she continued, her voice trembling, the moment I scanned it, the automated Federal alert system would have triggered. It's a silent alarm for counterfeit instruments over $10,000. The police would have been there in 5 minutes. She stopped. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of pity and fear. I asked. He came in yesterday, she said, right before closing. No, she said. He withdrew the remaining balance of his legitimate business account. He closed it, Mr. Caldwell. He cleaned it out. Every penny. He said he was, quote, consolidating assets for a new venture. I felt the blood drain from my face. I connected the dots, and the picture they formed was monstrous. Lucas had liquidated his own cash. He had handed me a fake check to buy my assets, knowing it would bounce and send me to jail. He planned to let me take the fall for fraud, a felony that would tie up my assets, ruin my credibility, and leave me destitute, while he walked away with the property title I had legally signed over. He wasn't just stealing the business, he was destroying me to ensure I couldn't fight back. He knew I wouldn't have the money for a lawyer if I was fighting a federal fraud charge. He emptied the accounts, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. So even if I sue him— Exactly, Jenny said. He's hiding the money. But I saw the transfer slip before he closed it. I have a photographic memory for numbers, Mr. Caldwell. I nodded. I did know that. She was sharp. I memorized the routing number of where he sent the cash, she whispered. She grabbed a napkin from the dispenser and a pen from her pocket. She scribbled a long string of numbers. It's a Cayman Island shell corporation. He's been planning this for months. June. June was when I first told him I was thinking about retiring. June was when he started bringing me coffee in the mornings. I looked at the napkin. It was just a piece of paper with numbers on it, but it was the blueprint of my son's soul. It was the architectural drawing of my ruin. Thank you, Jenny, I said. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You go back to work, she asked, her voice fearful. I'm going to finish the transaction, I said. I left the diner and drove straight to the office of Saul Berkowitz. Saul was my age, a retired attorney who spent his days fishing and smoking cigars that smelled like burning tires. He wasn't a criminal lawyer, but he was a shark who knew where all the bodies were buried in this town because he had helped dig half the graves. I walked into his cluttered study without knocking. He looked up from his fly-tying vise, surprised but not alarmed. When I showed him the counterfeit check and the napkin with the offshore account number, he didn't gasp. He didn't look shocked. He just lit a cigar, the smoke curling around his head like a halo of cynicism. We can't call the police yet, Henry, Saul said, his voice raspy. Lucas has the deed. You signed it. It's a civil matter until we prove criminal intent, and the check, he'll say you printed it. It's his word against yours. He'll say he gave you a real check and you lost it, or you're trying to scam him. Without a recording, without a confession, I signed the deed, I said, sinking into a leather chair that groaned under my weight. I gave him the shop. He owns the building, Saul corrected, pointing the glowing tip of his cigar at me. He owns the land. But did you read the fine print of the transfer contract? I shook my head. I trusted him, Saul. Saul smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a predatory grin that showed too many teeth. The inventory, Saul said.
The rare timber, the unfinished contracts, the vintage tools. Unless they were itemized specifically in the bill of sale, they are considered personal property of the artisan. They don't transfer with the real estate deed unless explicitly stated. I shook my head. I trusted him, Saul. Saul smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a predatory grin that showed too many teeth. The inventory, Saul said, the rare timber, the unfinished contracts, the vintage tools. Unless they were itemized specifically in the bill of sale, they are considered personal property of the artisan. They don't transfer with the real estate deed unless explicitly stated. I thought back to the contract. It was a standard real estate transfer. It did not mention contents. The black walnut, I whispered. I have $50,000 of black walnut slabs drying in the kiln. I have 3,000 board feet of Honduran mahogany in the loft. And the antique planes. He thinks he bought the business, Saul said, leaning back. He bought an empty shell. He bought a building. But we have to move fast. If he sells that wood, or if he moves it, it's gone. I stood up. The pain in my back was gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. I'm going back there, I said. Not to fight, Saul warned, standing up to face me. You have to play the part, Henry. You deposited the check, remember? As far as he knows, the money is clearing. You have a 24-hour window before he expects the bank to flag it. I know what to do, I said. I drove back to the shop. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the parking lot. My truck rumbled into the space next to Lucas's shiny new BMW. I walked in through the front door. The bell chimed, a sound I had loved for 40 years, now a sound that signaled my entry into enemy territory. Lucas was there. He was standing in the center of the showroom floor with a tape measure, measuring for new displays. He looked up when the door opened. For a split second, I saw panic in his eyes. He thought it was the police. Then he saw it was me. He plastered on that fake, loving smile, the one that used to make me proud, but now made me want to vomit. "Henry!" he exclaimed, walking toward me with open arms. "You're back! Did you deposit it? Are you ready for retirement?" I looked at him. I looked at the son who had tried to send me to jail so he could have a free building. I looked at the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I forced my mouth into a smile. It felt stiff, like rigor mortis setting in. "It's done," I lied. My voice was steady. I handed it to Jenny. Lucas relaxed. His shoulders dropped. He let out a breath he had been holding. "Great," he said. "That's great, Dad." "I just came to get my personal tool belt," I said, walking past him toward the back of the shop. "And maybe grab a few personal things from the office." "Of course not," Lucas said, turning back to his measuring. "Take whatever you need. It's your shop." "Yes," I said softly. I walked past him into the back workshop. The smell of sawdust hit me, comforting and familiar. I wasn't just getting my belt. I was getting ready to gut the place. I was getting ready to take back every single thing that made this building a business, leaving him with nothing but 4 walls and a mortgage he couldn't pay. The war had begun, and he didn't even know I was armed.